Good day everyone and welcome back to our YouTube channel. Welcome also to our online discussion of different topics of the subject 21st century literature of the Philippines and the world. For today's lesson, it is still connected to the topic that we discussed last time about poetry. Oppression is a familiar word in the Filipino vocabulary. There have been many uses for this term, whether it described the oppression of the less privileged by the elite, or the oppression of gender in the patriarchal society. In a way, Filipinos have always had to face oppression in many forms to another, beginning to our own history of colonization. Eventually, these colonizers would become conquerors and would prop up themselves at our own expense. Oppression and the struggle against it are common themes of Philippine literature. Jose Rizal's classic NOLI TANGERE and El Filibusterismo were examples of Filipino writing that depicts oppression here in our country. Hermenegildo Flores, Hibik ng Pilipinas sa Inang Espanya, and Marcelo H. del Pilar, Sagot ng Espanya sa Hibik ng Pilipinas, were likewise literary expression of what were perceived to be abuses by the colonizing power. Oppression as a topic would rise again and again and again and again in the Philippine literature. Aurelius Tolentino's play Kahapon, Ngayon at Bukas was a very controversial play during American colonization. It is because of its sharp criticism of the United States, particularly how the Americans stymied the Philippine Revolution. Jose Corazon Batute de Jesus wrote sa Dakong Silangan, which was a retelling of the Philippine history using allegory, presenting the United States conspiring with Spain to fool the Philippines into subservience. After independence, the spectator of oppression remained and found a clear subject once more, in the form of President Marcos. Increasing protests against his regime would eventually lead to his declaration of martial law and the arrest and imprisonment of many writers in the country. And that dramatic situation with the theme of oppression begins in the Philippine literature. As I stated, oppression begins in different form in our history. It is natural that our literature reflects our engagement of this thing to our society. In the beginning, our poets really used the theme of oppression as a subject of beginning and creating dramatic situation that will lead us to a greater understanding of the issues and how it affects our lives. Poems present this dramatic situation through or by a speaker. This speaker is what we call the persona. The persona in the poem is not typically the writer of the poem, but it is the character that is unmasked, which the poet used his or her voice in the poem. The persona could be a character in the poem that is involved in the dramatic situation, or the persona could be the observer in the poem who is watching the situation to unfold. Cirilo Bautista's poem presents us with a situation with allegorical, or not literal but rather representative of ideas or personalities. He also uses personification as a figure of speech in giving some non-human objects human qualities. To add more, it showcases both his skills as a writer and the relevance has led him to be hailed as a national artist.